So in this video, we're going to carry on with the server integration into the WPF application. So we're starting in the Fasetto Web server firstly. We're going to make the register call now so a user can create an account. So we'll start with, similar to the login, almost identical to the login command. We'll make a public async task that returns an API response like all of our API calls should. And this time we'll have a register result API model, and we will call it register async, and then we'll have from body, and we'll have a register credentials, and then we'll make this call. So there's the main function. Tries to register for a new account on the server. The registration details, and returns the result of the register request. I can copy that, paste that into there. And now we'll just make these models. So we've got login credentials API model. We'll copy and paste, and just be careful when we're doing that we make sure we update everything else to the correct names and things. So close that down, this will become register. The credentials for an API client to register on the server and receive, I'll just leave it at that. Public username, so in this case we'll have the user's username, which we'll have to update the WPF to allow that. We'll have the user's email and the user's password, and then we might as well also include first and last name. But I think what I'll do on the WPF application is to not ask the user for all that information when they're signing up. We'll simply let them sign up with email, password, and username, and then once they're logged in, we'll prompt them to enter the, finish filling out their account details, if you will. But we won't force that on them. So that's the register details. That's all we really need for that. So now we've got the details passed in. Now we need the result. So we'll have a register result API model. And again, the result for a successful register. In fact, that's wrong. The result of a register request. It's not necessarily successful because it can fail. So the result of a register request, register result API model. The result, if we successfully register, then yes, we want a token. We might as well log them in at the same time. So basically it's the profile details. So we'd almost want to inherit from the login result API model. So we've got all the same properties, because I don't think there's anything that we wouldn't want in there, all of those details. And then, to be honest, there's nothing custom right now, like different. You've got either successful, and it's logged in, you get the details, or it fails, and you've already got the message in the API response option here. So the login and register result are technically going to be the same at the minute, but just to keep it clear and allow us to expand in future if we wanted, I'm going to inherit from that, so we always keep the same details, but then we could tweak it as we needed. So that's all I'm going to do for that. So now we've got the call itself to actually register. So for that, we want to make a user first. So I'll have a new application user, and then we'll fill in the details there. Create the desired user from the given details. So we'll set the username equals register credentials dot username. We'll set the first name last name, email, and then the password gets passed in when you create the account. So try and create a user. Now we can also test this first. We'll make it create a user, and then we'll see how the actual user manager handles this in the first place. So the user manager, let's see if it gives us any options about what it throws. It returns an identity result. So I'm guessing it'll throw an error if a user already exists. So I don't know, and there's no comments here specifically to tell me there's any exceptions that are going to throw. So I could look at the source code, or there's a couple of options here. So what I'm trying to get at here is if we have say we've got a username Angel6, and then we could try and create a user Angel6, something's going to go wrong. Because this is going to return an identity result, which is basically a user, that cannot successfully return. That must throw some kind of error, and it doesn't tell us what. So I'm going to do an initial allow it to throw and see what happens, and then we'll handle that. We'll either manually check ourselves first to do some preemptive reassurance, which is what we should do really. Check if a user exists with the same username, and then if the presumption that everything's okay, we then create a user. Then that's where we should be okay. We should also potentially lock this function, because if two users try and create the exact same user at the same time, ultimately one of the database calls will fail, so it wouldn't happen anyway. But we may want to consider locking this. But let's just start with making the basics first, and then we'll expand on it. So let's just do just enough to get this thing actually up and running, if you will. So we'll get the var user, or created user, we'll call this. Try and create the user. So that's what we've done. We haven't passed in the password, which is register credential.password. What else now? So if the registration was successful, so if created user dot, in fact, my mistake. This might just return because it's an identity result rather, not an identity user. I was misreading that. So this is actually the result. So this might not throw, and I'd expect it not to now. So if we've got a result, we do whatever we need to do to succeed. Otherwise, if it failed, then we'd want to return a new API response with an error message of, and then do we have anything in the result to indicate the message? Yeah, errors. So we've got a bunch of identity errors. So we will want now a helper. That's just the object. We want a helper to extract every one of these, which would be, let's presume there's one in there. Okay, you can't do anything with it. It's an enumerator, so we'd have to kind of do that to. Oh, how can we do anything with this object? Maybe it's just because inside there it doesn't like working with it. There we go. So we'd have to cast it to list, and then, in fact, we could do that all in line. Yeah. So if it failed and we get an error, we can then get the result, get the errors if there are any, to list them, then select a specific thing, or I think we can aggregate it. I can never remember how to do an aggregate. So it's returning an error. Yeah. No, can't do that. Well, can we aggregate to a different type from the initial type? No. So we might have to select first. So let's get the identity error, and we'll just get the description. We don't care about the code for now. So we get those, and then we should break this down now. It's getting long. So the error message is a result.toList, and now we're going to select a specific thing, which is the string. Then we are going to aggregate, which simply means group them together. It's expecting a string return, and you've got two objects passed in, so you've got A and B. And I think A is the first one, and B is your resulting one. But again, we'll figure this out as we go and double check it. So we simply do aggregate A. We could do, in fact, that's going to look worse than, no, it would be fine like that. Environment.newLine and B. So we chuck them together. and that will return a single string. So that's basically going to combine a list of all errors, or an aggregated list of all errors, into one. So that will close the... Oh yeah, doesn't need the semicolon. There we go. Aggregate all errors into a single error string. Return the failed response. So that's if it failed. So all we've done is called into the user manager, the built-in user manager, to try and create the user. If it fails, we use the errors, if there are any, to list them because they're an enumerable. Then select the string, the description from each error, and then simply add every error together. So this aggregate will go, the first one would be A and B, so that, you know, the first error, the second error. The result would be the combination of both of them separated by a new line. The next one in the list, A then, should be effectively the result of the previous one, so A plus B. And then this would be the third one in the list. So then you're appending the two that were already appended to now the third one. So that's all this should do, like a list to, you know, just chuck all the errors into one list nice and easily. So this brings us to, if it succeeds, what we want to do there. So obviously what we want to do, the same as when we log in and succeed. So we have, if the user logs in, we have an error, invalid error. Make sure we have a username. So we could also just quickly copy this into here to check some basics first. So we could chuck this in and say if the register credentials dot username equals null, which why did we do it as null or that? That's actually there's no need to check that. Let's go back down a second. We've done we've done login credentials first to make sure we have credentials. That's what we're doing there. So make sure we have that. And if we do, make sure it isn't null. So the first check we could do, make sure we have a register credentials, and this stops all this null checking being required everywhere. So that gets us to there. That will remove the requirement for that. So if register credentials is null, so we have no credentials, then we will return, and we'll kind of copy this layout again from the login. Make the default error message first. Invalid, this won't be. Please provide all required details to register for an account. And then basically if we fail for a normal reason, this error response, then we can just return error response. And then if we have no credentials, or some credentials are missing. And in this case here, this is where we can, we don't have to do the check here. We can have the user manager when we set it up in the app, in startup, I believe. We can configure the identity to, you know, require certain things, which we might already do here. So we've got like options for identity. So the password requirements, we do also have, I think it's claims identity, or is it user? Allow username characters, require unique email. So for one, we'll set that to true. Make sure users have unique emails. But you can set some logic here for, you know, forcing restrictions on users and that. Let's see if we've got anything that claims identity. No, so there's nothing there. So right now there's a require unique email, and there's multiple ways of doing this checking. You don't have to do just a check here, to be honest, on the register, and you also kind of shouldn't in some sense, because if the user wants to update the profile, then you've got the same kind of check. So you don't just want to put the checks in here on, say, have they provided a valid username or a valid email, or is the first name required? Those kind of checks want to go elsewhere. So for now, I'm just going to actually leave those checks out, and we'll come back to that in a separate video. And we'll simply presume if they've provided any credentials that, so long as this call to create the user doesn't fail, we're good. That should return the error response. What's wrong with the error response? That's because it's returning the wrong response. There we go. So first, make sure we have no credentials, or rather, if we have no credentials, return the error. Make sure we have a username. That's again, it's a basic check. We obviously need a username, so we might as well do that check because that's a really obvious one. That is the key thing that every user has to have. So going back to the login to check, checking if it's, that doesn't matter. Find by email, don't care about that. Is valid password, we don't care about that. And then they create a token, so that we'd have to move this token out, token generation. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So let's register the account first, and then log them in using that logic. So if they've succeeded, next thing is to generate an email verification code. So for that, we're going to use the built-in user manager to generate a code. So I'll say email verification code, user manager. And all this will do is generate the token in the database. This will just generate a unique code, give it us, and set the user's database field, the one that says email verification token. It'll set that value in there. And then when we come to verify that code, we've got the same thing, user manager.verify email confirmation token, and that'll simply check that the passed in code matches and then flag the user's account as being validated. So nothing special going on there. So get the email verification code. Here then we want to email the user the verification code. And after that, then we just return a successful response. So if it's successful, we know it's successful. So the response is a new response. And then this, we now need the details of the user. So if we were successful, we want to get the user details, I guess, if it's not already in the result, which it won't be because that's just created the user. So now we can use var user account equals or user identity find by name by email. So we'll find by username, and we can register credentials.username because that's what we signed up for. And there's no reason why that would fail because we created it there and we've got it here. So we need to actually await that though. The user identity then we can pass in. And in fact, did we not make a helper extension method for that? So once we have the user, no, we should though. So we have here an application user, which we get. Where are we getting the application user? Where did I see application user? Am I looking at the wrong thing? User. So they just checked by their user is that found email. So it's the same user, but we want to extend. We want an extension method, so we don't have to do this every time to make. In fact, no, we can't because this is a different result. No, we'll just do it manually for now. Ignore my babbling. I'm just thinking things through. Copy and paste that for now. In fact, yeah, copy and paste that. Token will set up in a minute. So to do get token, and then we'll set that up. So now what we want to do, so we can share the logic, is we've done all this. So here now is our token. So this is all to get a token. So we cut all that and just say get JWT token. Something keeps going on with this tabbing. Something must be wrong tabbed up here. Ignore that for now. So for this, we'll just say var login token equals, and then we've got API controller. Don't really know where we want to put this. So it's going to be a claims. It's going to need the username. It's going to set details up. Honestly, don't know where to put that code. Not that it's super important right now, but it's specific to the web project. I guess authentication. We need a new class, so we'll have add class, and we'll call it JWT token. I'll try and do this as an extension method. I don't like helpers anymore. I like to do extension methods. What's the namespace we're working in? Web server, that's it. Extension methods for working with JWT bearer tokens. Public static string generate token. Pass in some stuff in a minute. What is going on with this tabbing? There we go. New claim. Claims imported the wrong namespace. Oh, come on, what's going on here? Claim.claim. System.security.claims. Oh, just because it hasn't got username yet. Signing credentials. Let's just pass in a username for now, just to shut that up from complaining. Get that, get encoding. Right, so all we've done is move this logic out. Right now, the only thing we add as a claim is a unique ID and a username. So for now, that's okay, I guess. And then we'll just return token. We can expand on this again. We'll keep it simple for now. Return the generated token. And of course, you're going to complain. Or rather, let's return the security token. And then we pass in, no, actually, let's still return a string. We don't really care about the token itself. And then we'll write the token. So that is okay. Let's just comment there. Generates a JWT bearer token containing the user's username. And that's it. So we've segregated that. Now I want to try and make this a helper. So because this is a username only, and we might want more information about the user. So I don't know whether use application user. Yeah, because we can make an application user. Which is what we've done up here. So yeah, let's extend application user instead. So it's a nice extension method. And then we'll do user. And now we'll just say user.username and do it that way. And this is now user, the user's details. And I think that's it. So to now get the token, we don't even need to do it there. We can just do token equals user dot generate token. And there we go. We'll rename that actually to generate JWT token, so it's nice. Email verification, return valid response containing all users' details. Otherwise fail. So all that we've got to do here is verify email, which I don't care about for now. The login is all the same, but now where we would have got the token, we can now do user.generate token. So that cleans that call up a bit. Or we can do the same thing again here. We can just do get username and then add the token straight to it. So I think that's enough to at least just get this thing building and using registering a user basically. So let's just open up the database and let's take a look in the database first, and then we'll monitor what happens in the database so you can see what goes on, and what needs to be done when we're registering a user. So databases, Fasetto Word, tables, and then we have the new, well, they're not the new, the ASP.NET users. So select all from ASP.NET users. And can we zoom in on that? I can never zoom in on that bit, but let me have a quick see if I can increase the size of this results window thing. Text editor. I don't know, that's going to be obvious. Text results, size 7, there we go, size 10. We change it, we'll restart. Okay, so we've got to just restart that window or the whole application. Let's try restarting the whole application a minute. Okay, that didn't work. Anyway, you can see enough, I'm sure, down here. So we've got the current single user. We've got my username. It's not been confirmed. Sorry, my email address. You've got the username. So this is already in the database and ready. So now if we have a register call and we copy and paste this to register, then we need to go and make the WPF side of things. So this is not running. Let's press F5 to get it running. Put a breakpoint in to at least hit this once we're ready. And we'll start on the Fasetto Word WPF application now. So if I just drag this into view, and we'll start working on the WPF application. So we'll spin it up first, make sure it's still running. Or rather, make sure it still builds, basically. Just make sure it's, test your app before you start messing with it. So here's the app. We'll sign out. And then this is now the page we need to hook up. So we need to obviously include now a username field. And then obviously the register we can hook up to calling the web server. So let's get started on adding that field and then adding the call to the server. Right, so where do we start? Fasetto Word, controls, maybe, or is it just the page? Been a while since I've been in here. Register page. Right, so here's where we are. Email, password. We have email. We want a password as well, username we want. So probably start with username. And is focused true, we'll move to the username. Tag will be username. So now the binding behind, which is register view model, now needs a username. The username of the user. Username, so there we go. We can now bind to username. And then when we come to register, we can... oh, I thought this was register login. Oh, takes the user to the login page. I was going to say that's just that's going to the page. I thought that was literally logging in. So yeah, so this is the call we need to do the register. This is where we actually want to do the stuff we need to do. Everything else should be already bound and working now just from doing that. So now we've got username, email, password. Add username to our spell check file if we have one. Yep. And let's just copy from our core view model. Whoops. Application. Yeah, so let's copy from the login view model. And we will copy all of this code for now. Just dump it in. And go to here, paste it in. And typically this is a very dangerous thing to do, just copy and paste a big bunch of code like this, but we're going to be careful. So call the server to attempt to register with the credentials. Move all. Yes, that's still going to move. We're going to make a web request. It's going to now be a register result request. It's going to go to API register. We still need to make these into URLs in the core so we can share them, but no major rush for that. Register credentials API model. Username is username. Email is email. Password is the password. And we got first and last name, which we don't bind yet. We could take a look at adding that to the page because it's not overly, we're not asking for tons of information, but mainly I like to keep things simple to the user so they don't look at a load of things to add. But we could literally just chuck in like 2 more boxes and spin that up and let's just see. So let me just quickly cut that out so I can build and run. And we go to log out, register, and you see we're left with this kind of a bit too much info in my eyes. So we could do different things, but to be honest, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it small. Chuck that back in there. Remove those extra 2, and then, like I say, once they're signed in, we'll have them add the extra info if they want. Right, so we did up to here. We validated that's correct for the register side. And then if there was no response, bad data or server response, that's still all valid input. And again, we can start sharing this kind of logic as we want to consolidate. Unknown error from server, that'd also happen. If we got a response from the server, set the message. If we have no result, deserialize. Unexpected server failed communication. And then message failed. So to be honest, all of that is really shared logic for just a standard failure. So we can make this into a function and it would return. So, well, I say it would return. This would be a pop-up style error message, which we'll do for now, which is good enough. I'll probably turn it into more of a, when a username fails, we'll highlight the user or something, as opposed to pop-up dialogue saying something. But for now, pop-up's fine. It gets it going, gets the, the main application working, which is more important. So if we cut all of that logic out there, and this, we can then say if check result or well, it's just a name I'm thinking. So basically it wants to check the result for failure and report the error at the same time. So result, well, we can do an extension method as well on the result, which is an API response result. So again, we'll go to core. We want extension methods on the API result. So that is an API response. We'll make a new class, and this will be called API response extensions. Remove that. Public static class. Extension methods for the API response class. Public static boolean. And then this will be on the response. So report, or I don't really know what to call it. Display error if failed. I don't know. This API response T. And that should be ascertainable through calling directly. This will call them result to match that, and then change it to response with Control RR. Is that just complaining we haven't returned yet? So if the response.server response, or is it not response? Web request results rather. Typical after all that. Web request result extensions. And then, so that's an extension for that. Display if failed. And then, oh, come on. Oh, that's the web request result. So that can go to, in fact, I could merge that right into the DNA. No, I can't because of this. So we're going to expand on web request result extensions in there, which is not really now the place for it in an API model. So we will then have a new folder. And I always say this is at least 60% of all developers' time is simply naming things, placing things, and thinking up, names for stuff. That's the main confusion here. I'm just trying to think of good names. Web requests. Chuck it in there so it's a bit easier to find. Right, so now it's in that folder. If there is no errors, this is now the original code. Server response is an object, so now we're going to have to pass in a type, or are we? So server response is an object unless we have a type. So it's got to be a web request response of an API response of something, because it's the API response that's important. So it is really an API. I'm going to go back to renaming something again in a minute. It is an API response. What's wrong with IntelliSense here? Yes, okay, just return false for now. Comment all this out. Right, so can I get my IntelliSense back now? No, why has my IntelliSense completely died? Right, so can I have an API response of nothing? Do we have a generic class? No, so it's always got to be something, which I'm sure we don't have to. I'm sure there's an API response without a T. No, okay, that's surprising. I'll make that in core as well. Right then, this is turning long-winded. So this wants to be an API response of T. And this can then be an API response of T. And of course, it keeps failing because I'm being an idiot and putting this in a totally wrong place. It's on the... oh no, it doesn't. Should be going there. Why is this so difficult? What am I doing wrong? Web request result. A response. So what's wrong with that? I'm missing the end off. There we go, finally. That was very long-winded and confusing. I should have paid more attention. Right, so it's a web request result extension because we're making use of the web request result for the most part, but we also want to make use of the inner success of the API response. So this nice, fancy, confusing-looking extension method does exactly what we did, but allows us to call it directly just on an extension to process simply any error regardless, because all this logic is going to be shared regardless of the error. And then it's just this bit now we need to fix. Right, so this needs an await. So this will now be a async task that returns Boolean. There we go. And this will now have to be named async. I now don't like this name. display error if failed. Well, it's as description. It's as descriptive as it can be, really, to be honest. Checks the web request result for any errors, displaying them if there are any. And to be honest, that's it, because the returns value is returns true if there was an error, or false if all was okay. This thing will fix the generic passing into the API response by making DNA Framework have just an API response generically, because we don't care about the information, we just want the successful. So we don't need this T, but just because right now my DNA Framework doesn't have a standard API responsive object, at least I don't think so. Oh, maybe it does. No, it doesn't. So I'll fix that so the T won't be required after, but for now, we've got we're going to have to just do that. So that's not really an issue. The response to check. So it does all that, and then it returns true, there was an error. Return that we had an error. All was okay. So return false for no error. And all this will be localized, as I mentioned. This is a title, this will be the custom bit. So that will be the title to be passed in. The title of the error dialog if there is an error. And okay, I guess it needs to be capitalized. Right, so API wants to go into the ignored words. So now we can make use of this finally. So we haven't really changed any code there, and I know it took me a while to figure out, so I think my brain's on go slow today, but this is now just an extension method of the result we get. So ultimately, we can now, instead of doing all that check we did here for an error, we can instead just go if result dot display error, and title would have been login failed in this case. So if it failed, if the response has an error, we are done because we would have displayed it. And this, I don't know what's going on with all this indentation. I'm sure something's out of line here. There we go. So this we need to await, because obviously it's the awaited one. So if we've got an error, we now just do that, and it will automatically display for us. So all that logic that we had for all the customized checking of the response, the error, that we'd have to do for every single request call, we're now good at just doing it the once. So there's the check. It also means in the, where did we originally call this? In the login. Here we go again. Where's the view model? There, in the login view model, where we've got all this checking, all that can now go to the same check. So we've now kept it dry. We're not repeating ourselves. So in fact, that's the login call that we've cleaned up. This is the register call, so this would be register failed. And so this is now try to register, post. If the result was successful, we will also be logged in and we'll also get the user data. So that's still true. And it will be the right type. So now you can store the credentials. So again, save login credentials, and we're making this data model. This really is shared logic. So saving the credentials, loading the settings, and going to the chat page. Really, this whole thing is really the on login. On login successful, really, is what I'd say. So now it's where you want to store this logic, because again, this is shared between the two. So we've got the exact same thing here. Once we've had a response, and also the user data as a login result, we make the decision to save it to the database, load the settings, and go to a page. But it's in terms of now what's responsible for this logic. What's responsible for effectively a successful login. So I'd personally say it should be this. It's either going to be this login view model, because you can instantate this, or we put it in the application view model, which I believe is static as well. So this is the state of the whole application, because that's kind of a decision, I'd say, like the go to pages. I'd say it's an application level decision. So I'd put it in here as a public void on successful login, or again, the name is the most important thing here. So it's not login because we have logged in. It's, process login, I guess, or handle login. So handle successful login. So start with that. And then it will be handles what happens when we have successfully logged in. And I would say that should be all pasted into there. So that is now obviously an async task. So we can await that. That will now have to be called async. So we await the client store, we save the credentials, so now we need the user data. So ultimately we need this. So we could make it, again, an extension method, but that's not the point. We don't want an extension method here. We want this to be, this is a view model's decision of what to do. So instead, we're going to pass in a login result API model because it's a successful login. So we want the login result. And then we do everything we did already. Log in, go to settings, go to chat page. So now it's in one specific location. We need to handle, or rather comment, the login results. The results from the successful login. And this is where also sharing that, close that down now. Sharing the register result API model being a login result, because effectively it's the same thing anyway, allows us to also share this logic of, why has it disappeared? This logic here to be able to pass in that same object to do the same thing. So now we've got this handle successful login result. In here where we were doing it, which was there, instead now we can use ioc.application, which is the application view model, .handle login successful, user data. We can now rename to login result, and we can await that. Let the application view model handle what happens with the successful login. So now we can get rid of all of that, paste the same thing in. This is login result, successfully registered and logged in. Now get user data. So in terms of the difference now between a login and a register, you can see we have a different call. So register call and then different details. Then we simply check generically for the same error, get the result and handle a login. So we could even combine this further if we really wanted to be a single call that's register or login, which simply passes in this object and an URL, those two variations and the third one. But to be honest, by the time you've passed in an URL, a credentials specifically to something else, the type, the string, then you've done just as much work as the 4 lines of code it's taken. So that's as much as I think will refactor that. So that's kind of how it worked there. I'm sure you can tell from this video, this was a very unstructured and unplanned video. I simply said, right, let's do the register page and work through it. So this is kind of how I'd work when the videos aren't prepared. And I always say this is good to see every now and then, me just fumbling around and figuring it out, and you get to see the thought process involved of what I'm thinking. So we started by just copying and pasting the login view, dumping it into the register, and then working our way through naturally to try and reduce the duplication of code. So we're now at the point where we have the register page hooked up. It'll call the right function. It should hit our server. We should get a result, and we should log in just the same. And we should also handle the errors. So in theory now, if we just put a breakpoint at least there and press F5 to run. And I presume my server's still running that I made. We log out, remember, because right now our logout doesn't really log out. So I can't even remember where we've got the logout in the settings view model. Our logout right now just clears the user data, and we've got it to do here to remove it from the database. So that's why every time we start the app, we keep staying logged in. But that's fine for now. So log out, create an account, enter nothing first, and we see we hit here. It'll try and create nothing, and now we hit our server, which is good. We get the model, because we have still passed a model, just with no data, so that's all valid. So we should hit our first check of no username, and return a response. And then back in, I'm presuming our app has now popped up some kind of error message. Or have we got back to, yeah, so here we go. So we've got the result, pops into here, there's some kind of error. It figures out that the server response isn't equal to null. So it's going to display the error message, which is that. And we press F5, and there we go. Please provide all required details to register an account, and click OK. And I presume that now is back to here, so that's good. So this is where, like I say, we can improve this in future, and we will. It's just I don't want to spend too much time perfecting each little thing when we want to really get this app working as a proper chat app. So in future, we'll make this so as you're typing, we'll have some kind of live validation going on that simply checks if you should have a username first, and if the email's valid, and if you've entered a password. And those validation rules will come into the view models. The register view model will know that instantaneously, and that'll share the core logic between the server and the app, so it's the same. But for now, kind of just a pop-up for if it worked or not's okay. So first thing I want to try is let's make a user with the exact same username. Let's not even bother with a password for now. So this will hit that, we know that. We know this now hits a result, so we don't need to breakpoint there each time, because we know that's going to call that, send the right info in, and then fail or get to here when we finally succeed. So this now goes off. We hit our server. We have a username, so now it's going to try and create a user with the username Angel6, but no other details. So this is where now we should fail, which is good, we do. And this is where the errors should now aggregate. So there's 3, which is a good now test if this will bundle them all up into a single error. And they are, password must be 5 characters, password must be lowercase, password blah blah. So it's 3 password errors. So that's returned, and then look, we now have our nice accumulation of 3 errors. So that's a good bit of feedback. So if we now go back to here, and I just put a password 1, say, and register. We then get to here again, and to be honest, I think this should, oh no, this should now fail, saying there's already a user. So this should still fail, good, and that's actually failed on 2 counts. The username Angel6 already exists, and the email is already taken, so that's good. So we're getting decent feedback naturally from the user manager of the server. Again, we could display this much nicer. Instead of a pop-up, we potentially have just a red box here, or a little pop-up that comes up here, or this would go red. You know, again, all those kind of little details we'll handle when we get back to basic WPF stuff, where we want to clean up the standard WPF. But right now, we want to just integrate this in and get it working. So the sign-up now, let's say Angel6.2 and contact2@angel6.com, and password 1's a password. This should now successfully register. So if we click register, we get into here, it gets down, creates the user, and apparently we still, oh yeah, we did succeed now. So now we succeeded, we get the user, we generate an email verification code, which at this point you'll see now is this big long string here. If we now look in the database at the users, we've got another user, so there's our new user. The email isn't confirmed, but we should have, and it's where they don't store it in here then. ASP.NET user tokens. Maybe that's where they're storing the token. Nope. Where are they storing the where are they storing this key? Unless this is not actually a they might not be storing it in the database now. This generation might be using similar to the JWT tokens. This is probably just a privately signed string that will get unsigned only by the application. So I'd have to do a bit of research into this bit because I haven't dug really deep into where this code comes from. But basically, that's just a unique number, if you will, a unique code that now we need to email to the user. So this is the last little step we've got to do. And then we'll probably just jump in and have a quick look at the source code to this to get an answer to that. But this is part of the baked-in user manager that handles it, which is part of .NET Core. So I'm not too worried about that. That is what it is. But we will find out exactly where this comes from. But I'm pretty sure that's just going to be a signed key, just like the JWT token. So this now is what we need to send to the user when they click the verify email to allow them to verify their email address, basically. So if we keep hold of that, in fact, no, we'll have another call to regenerate this token for when the user wants to resend the token. But basically now we should have had the username that's going to return everything. And oops, I've done the wrong thing there. I've passed the user that we passed in, not the user identity. So this is going to return successful, but with the wrong info. So let's just kill that first. User identity should be there. And let me just delete. Shouldn't really do this. Don't do this in production. Delete ASP.NET net users where ID equals, and then we'll delete that one, the top one. And there goes the user. So like I say, don't do that. That's just me being quick to get that response. So now we know at least that's going to register. It's going to create the user. And it would have come back to our WPF app if it weren't for me killing the application, which is also something here we still need to handle. The web request just crashing, which effectively crashes the application right now, I believe. But that's, like I say, something we'll work on next. Where were we? Done that. Settings, view model, close some of these. Client data store. Register view model. Right, so we can... Let's show you successfully logging in again. So now if we were to run the server again and run the web app, the WPF, and then we log out, register, angel62, contact2 at angel6.com, password 1, and we're happy that all works. We now get a result. The login result, or rather this is the register result, but we called it the login result. We got the email. We didn't specify a first or last name. We've got the token we need for the email, or rather the login. Sorry, that's the login token, the JWT token. And then we've got the username. So all the same stuff, and now handle successful login just the same. So now it should take us here, and the settings page has the correct info in, the new info. So we've now successfully logged in with the new user. If we restart that, then we should still be logged in as that user, if you will. It should still restart and have the new info in because it's in our database. But the difference now is we have no... the email isn't verified, basically, which is something we want to do. So there's a lot of things here to clean up, to add. So we want to add like the email verification and verify that. We want to then, inside the Word application, have some kind of banner that says your user isn't currently, you currently haven't verified your email. Please verify and click. And then we'd like to potentially clean up the UI on the register page. I don't know at what stage I go back. It depends on the time I get to do it. And I want to try and fit that video in as an extra if I do. But basically, I think the next stage to this is to do the email verification and actually send an email. So this should at least get us to now we have an actual working register call where you can now create users. which also sign in. So I think this is a good stopping point. If you like what I'm doing and you'd like to support me, I do mention I have a Patreon page now. So if anyone wants to, donate to what I'm doing, it's much appreciated. If you've got any questions about anything I do in the videos, any comments, improvements, suggestions, anything, leave them in the comments, and I always get back to every single comment that pops up. So do that if you like, and hopefully again this video is useful. And I'll catch you in the next one.